Welcome to Stoic Philosophy for Life. This is not just a place to listen to books, it's a space to feel them with your soul. Here, we illuminate your mind with timeless lessons. Awaken your inner strength, cultivate self-minded discipline, and guide your journey of personal growth. Every word is carefully chosen to reach what you're truly seeking: peace, clarity, and lasting transformation. If this feels like the place for you, hit subscribe and walk this path with us every single day. Now, put on your headphones, take a deep breath, and begin the journey of renewing your mind and your life. Train your mind to win in every situation. Have you ever wondered why some people seem unshaken, no matter how difficult their situation becomes? They lose a job, face betrayal, or stand in the middle of chaos, yet their voice stays steady and their mind remains clear. It is not because life is easier for them, it is because they have trained their minds to win before the battle even begins. The Stoics understood this secret. Marcus Aurelius ruled during plagues and wars, yet found peace within himself. Epictetus, born into slavery, discovered freedom in his own thoughts. Seneca faced political exile and still wrote words that inspire us today. They all knew one truth: if you master your mind, you can face any situation and come out stronger. Training the mind is not about pretending that pain does not exist. It is about meeting reality without collapsing under it. The Stoics believed that life will always hand you challenges, but those challenges are raw material. You can either build something with them or let them bury you. Epictetus said it clearly: it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This means that every obstacle is a choice point. You can choose anger, fear, or despair, or you can choose patience, courage, and clarity. The situation itself does not decide the outcome. You do. Think of the mind as a muscle. If you never test it, it remains weak and collapses under even small weights. But if you face discomfort daily, delays, criticism, unexpected changes, you begin to build strength. The Stoics used daily life as training. A long wait in line was a chance to practice patience. An insult was an opportunity to practice self-control. A failure was a lesson in resilience. Every moment became a drill, shaping a mind that could stand firm in storms. So, if you want to win in every situation, you must stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "How can I use this to grow?" Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is not just a poetic line, it is a mindset. When you adopt it, nothing can truly defeat you, because even loss becomes fuel for progress. If you are ready to walk this path, understand that it will not happen overnight. Training your mind is not a one-time effort, it is a way of living. But with each small victory over your impulses, each calm decision in the face of chaos, you will feel your inner strength grow. And one day you will realize that there is no situation in which you are powerless, because the battlefield was always within you, and you have learned to win there first. There is a dangerous myth that the ability to remain calm under pressure is a gift that only a few people are born with. In truth, it is a skill, a craft that anyone can learn if they are willing to train. The Stoics did not wake up with unshakable minds. They built them one decision at a time over years of testing themselves against life. Marcus Aurelius was not immune to frustration. His writings are filled with reminders to himself to stay steady when provoked. Epictetus had every reason to hate the world, yet he chose discipline over bitterness. Seneca admitted his own failings, but returned to practice each day as a musician returns to his instrument. They understood that mastery of the mind comes from repetition, not from waiting for the right moment to begin. The first step in training your mind is accepting that most of life is beyond your control. This is not surrender, it is liberation. The Stoics taught that our energy is wasted when we fight against the inevitable.
You cannot control the weather, the economy, the past, or the behavior of others, but you can control how you meet each of these realities. Epictetus divided life into two categories: what is within our control and what is not. Everything else follows from this. If it is within your control, your thoughts, your actions, then focus on it. If it is not other people's opinions, the course of events, then release it. This simple discipline frees the mind from constant agitation and creates space for reason to act. Imagine you are a sailor. You cannot control the wind or the waves, but you can adjust your sails and choose your direction. When a storm hits, an untrained sailor curses the sky and panics, wasting precious time. The trained sailor accepts the storm as part of the journey, focuses on steering, and survives where others sink. In life, every difficult moment is a storm. Your reaction determines whether you sink or sail forward. The second step is to recognize the gap between event and reaction. This gap is where your freedom lives. Most people collapse that space into a single instant. They react the moment something happens. Someone insults them and they fire back. A plan fails and they give up. But the Stoics trained themselves to pause even for a breath before responding. In that pause, they asked, "What is the most honorable action I can take here?" It is in this gap that emotion loses its grip and reason steps forward. You may not always choose the perfect response, but the very act of pausing builds strength over time. One way to practice this is through voluntary discomfort. The Stoics often engaged in exercises that made them intentionally uncomfortable, not to punish themselves, but to prepare their minds. They would sleep on the floor for a night, to remind themselves that comfort is not a necessity. They would imagine losing what they valued most, not to become gloomy, but to appreciate it fully, and to be ready should it ever happen. Seneca walked through the streets in humble clothing to test whether he could bear the judgment of others. These exercises created a mind that did not crumble when real hardship arrived because it had already met hardship in smaller doses. In our modern world, voluntary discomfort can take many forms. You can practice patience by choosing the longest checkout line at the store. You can train resilience by turning off your phone for a day and sitting with your own thoughts. You can strengthen discipline by finishing a task without giving in to distraction, no matter how small. These are not random challenges, they are weights for the muscle of the mind. Just as you would not expect to lift a heavy load without training, you should not expect to face life's storms without strengthening yourself in smaller trials. The third step is reframing, changing the way you interpret what happens to you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you will not feel harmed." This is not about denying pain, but about controlling its meaning. Suppose you lose a job. Most people would call it a disaster, but what if you chose to see it as an opportunity, a chance to redirect your life toward something better? The facts are the same, only the meaning changes. And when the meaning changes, your entire response changes with it. This mental shift is one of the most powerful tools you can develop. It turns setbacks into training grounds and keeps you from being crushed by circumstances. Let us take an example. Imagine two people whose flights are delayed by several hours. One paces the terminal, cursing the airline, feeling their blood pressure rise. The other sits down, opens a book, and uses the time to learn something new. The event is identical, but the experience is completely different because of the way each person has trained their mind. The first loses twice, once to the delay and again to their own agitation. The second turns an inconvenience into a victory. The fourth step is building rituals of reflection. The Stoics ended each day by reviewing their actions and thoughts. They asked themselves, what did I do well? Where did I fail to act as I should? How can I improve tomorrow? This was not self-condemnation, it was self-correction. It allowed them to notice patterns, to catch themselves sooner the next time, and to celebrate progress. In our age, this can be as simple as spending 5 minutes before bed, writing down 3 things you did well and 1 thing you want to improve. Over weeks and months, these reflections form a map of your growth. Finally, training your mind requires community, not necessarily a large one, but the right one. The Stoics gathered in schools and circles of like-minded thinkers, challenging each other to live their philosophy. Alone, it is easy to drift. Surrounded by others who share your values, you are reminded to stay on course. This does not mean you must cut yourself off from those who think differently, but it does mean you should guard your inner circle. The voices you hear most often shape the thoughts you think most often. If you commit to these practices, accepting what you cannot control, pausing before you react, embracing voluntary discomfort, reframing setbacks, reflecting daily, and surrounding yourself with the right influences, you will notice a profound shift. Life will not suddenly become easy. The storms will still come, but you will no longer meet them as a victim. You will meet them as a sailor who has trained for rough seas, as a warrior who has sharpened his mind for battle. And in that readiness, you will find a kind of quiet victory that no one can take from you. If you have listened this far, you are already ahead of most people because you are willing to train where it matters most, inside yourself. Take a moment to think of one challenge you are facing right now. Ask yourself, how can I use this to grow stronger? Then act on the answer. And if you found this message valuable, share it with someone who might need to hear that they too can win in any situation, not by changing the world, but by changing the way they face it. And remember to subscribe so we can continue walking this path together. There is a moment in every challenge when the mind whispers, "This is the end." It is the point where frustration meets fatigue, where the problem seems too large and your strength too small. But what if that moment was not a wall, but a doorway? The Stoics believe that the very things that seem to block our path can become the path itself. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is not poetic optimism, it is a strategy for survival and growth. It means that every obstacle is an invitation, not a prison. To see this, you must first let go of the idea that life should be smooth. Smooth seas make poor sailors. A life without resistance does not build the muscles of the mind. If you expect comfort, every difficulty will feel like an injustice. But if you expect difficulty, every challenge becomes a training ground. The Stoics saw adversity as a blacksmith sees fire. It is the very thing that shapes and strengthens the steel. Without it, the blade remains soft and useless. Imagine a tree growing on the edge of a cliff. The wind there is fierce, the soil thin, the rain inconsistent. And yet the tree does not curse the wind. It bends, it roots itself deeper, it grows stronger wood. In time, it becomes more resilient than the trees sheltered in the valley. Your mind can grow the same way. Each hardship you face forces you to dig deeper, to find resources you did not know you had. The challenge itself becomes the reason for your strength. Of course, this is easy to say in theory and hard to practice in the moment. When the obstacle is in front of you, it feels like a threat, not a gift. That is why the Stoics trained themselves to pause and ask a different question. Not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "How can I use this?" This question shifts you from victim to strategist. It pulls you out of complaint and into action. Every situation has something you can learn, some skill. You can sharpen some weakness you can confront. Your task is to find it. Take the example of Thomas Edison. When his factory burned down in 1914, destroying years of work, most people would have collapsed in despair. Edison looked at the flames and said, "There is great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." Within weeks, he was building again. The fire did not stop him, it cleared the path for his next invention. This is the Stoic mindset in action. The obstacle was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter. In our daily lives, obstacles often take the form of small irritations. Traffic jams, delayed plans, misunderstandings. It is easy to dismiss these as trivial, but they are perfect opportunities for training. If you can keep your patience in the small storms, You will be steadier in the great ones. Treat each frustration as a test. Can I remain calm here? Can I act with dignity here? The more you practice, the more automatic your strength becomes. There is also a hidden advantage in adversity. It reveals your allies. In easy times, many will walk beside you. In hard times, only the true remain. When you face a difficulty, watch who steps forward to help and who steps back. Both reveal important truths. The Stoics valued adversity. For this reason, it clears away the unnecessary, leaving only what is real. The same is true of your own character. Hardship shows you who you really are without the polish and performance. Sometimes you will not like what you see, but that too is a gift, because you cannot change what you do not face. To turn obstacles into advantages, the Stoics practiced a three-step mental shift. First, they acknowledged the reality without exaggeration or denial. This is the problem. Second, they asked, what is within my control here? Third, they acted on that answer with discipline. No energy wasted on complaining about what could not be changed. No paralysis while waiting for the perfect conditions. Action now in the best way available, even if the step is small. Consider a modern example. A young athlete suffers a career-ending injury. At first, it feels like the death of their identity. But instead of drowning in regret, they decide to study sports science, becoming a coach who helps others avoid the injuries they once suffered. The injury did not destroy their passion. It redirected it. The obstacle became the way. You do not need to be an athlete to apply this. Every setback has within it a seed of transformation, but it will not grow unless you plant it through action. One practical tool for this mindset is negative visualization, a Stoic exercise in which you imagine possible challenges before they happen. This is not pessimism, it is preparation. By rehearsing difficulties in your mind, you reduce the shock when they arrive. If you imagine losing a client, you begin to think about how you would adapt. If it happens, you are ready. This turns the unexpected into the anticipated, and the anticipated into the manageable. Another tool is to keep a victory journal, where you record times when you have overcome difficulties. In moments of doubt, you can read these entries and remind yourself, I have been here before. I have faced worse and prevailed. This builds confidence not from empty affirmations, but from evidence. Your own history becomes a source of strength. The final ingredient is patience. Not every obstacle can be turned into an advantage immediately. Some require time to reveal their value. The Stoics knew that growth is often slow, like the turning of seasons. In the moment, the difficulty may seem meaningless, but years later, you may see how it shaped you in ways comfort never could. Trust the process. Keep walking the path. The meaning often arrives after the struggle, not during it. If you begin to see obstacles in this way, life changes. You stop dreading difficulties and start using them. You become like a river that flows around rocks, sometimes splitting, sometimes deepening, but always moving forward. You cannot control the rocks, but you can control the flow. And in doing so, you win not by avoiding the fight, but by mastering the way you fight. If you have listened this far, you know you have the ability to turn your own obstacles into stepping stones. Think of one challenge you are facing right now. Write down how it could make you stronger, wiser, or more disciplined. Then take one action, however small, to move in that direction. Share this with someone who might need to hear it today. You never know. It may be the spark they need to see their own path differently. And remember to subscribe so we can keep walking this road together, turning each obstacle into a victory. There is a difference between calmness as a mood and calmness as a skill. A mood fades when the day changes. A skill stays with you, even in the middle of chaos. The Stoics understood that true strength was not found in a clenched fist or a loud voice, but in a steady mind when the storm is raging. Epictetus wrote, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." The noise out is never the real problem. It is the noise inside. If you train your mind to be still, you can move through any situation without losing yourself. Calmness in chaos does not mean you are indifferent or numb. It means you see clearly and act deliberately instead of reacting blindly. Think of a firefighter entering a burning building. Panic would not only be dangerous, it would be deadly. What keeps them alive is training the practiced ability to focus on the next step, the next breath, the next decision. Life's emergencies may not involve flames and smoke, but they demand the same discipline. In the heat of pressure, your mind must become the cool center. One way to train this is to slow your perception in moments of stress. When something goes wrong, a sudden accusation, a shocking piece of news, a mistake at work, do not rush to react. Breathe, notice what is happening in your body. Name the emotion rising in you. This is anger, this is fear. The simple act of naming separates you from the emotion. You are no longer inside the storm, you are observing it. The Stoics called this the view from above, seeing events as if you were looking down from a height detached from the immediate pull. Marcus Aurelius often practiced this mental elevation. When faced with insults or betrayal, he reminded himself, they act out of ignorance of what is good or evil. This was not an excuse for bad behavior, but a refusal to be poisoned by it. When someone wrongs you, you can either carry their fire inside you, or you can let it burn itself out without feeding it. Choosing the second path is not weakness, it is self-mastery. Consider the story of James Stockdale, a U.S. Navy pilot shot down during the Vietnam War. He was captured and spent over 7 years as a prisoner of war, enduring torture and isolation. What kept him alive was his commitment to Stoic principles. He could not control his captivity, but he could control his thoughts. He refused to give in to despair or rage, focusing instead on his duty to his fellow prisoners and on maintaining his inner dignity. He later said, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality." This is calmness forged in fire. You may never face a prison camp, but you will face situations that test your composure, an unfair boss, a family crisis, a financial setback. In those moments, the temptation is to collapse into emotion or lash out in anger. Training your mind means preparing for these moments before they arrive. This is why the Stoics practiced daily reflection. In the morning, they would anticipate challenges they might face. Today, I will meet interference, ingratitude, insolence. In the evening, they would review how they responded. Where did I remain calm? Where did I falter? Over time, this builds awareness and resilience. Another powerful practice is voluntary discomfort. This means occasionally stepping into situations that are inconvenient or challenging, not because you have to, but because you choose to. It could be taking a cold shower, fasting for a meal, walking instead of driving, or speaking last in a heated discussion. These small acts teach your mind that discomfort is not fatal. When real stress arrives, it will not be foreign to you. Your mind will recognize the terrain. You can also anchor your calmness in purpose. When you know why you are doing something, it is harder for chaos to shake you. A parent protecting a child, a soldier defending a comrade, a doctor saving a patient. Each moves with clarity in crisis because the mission is clear. Ask yourself often, what is my purpose in this moment? If the answer is strong, your mind will steady itself around it. There will be times when your calmness is misunderstood as passivity. People may mistake your silence for weakness or your patience for indifference. Let them. The Stoics cared little for appearances. They cared for truth and action. Calmness is not about looking serene, it is about being effective. A mind that stays cool under pressure makes better decisions, wastes less energy, and inspires trust in others. Nature offers a perfect metaphor for this. Picture a mountain lake on a still morning. Its surface reflects the world around it with perfect clarity because it is undisturbed. If the water is churned by wind and rain, the reflection disappears. Your mind works the same way. In turbulence, you cannot see the truth of a situation clearly. Calmness allows accurate perception, and accurate perception is the foundation of wise action. This skill of staying steady does not come overnight. It comes from 1,000 small choices: to pause before you speak, to listen before you judge, to think before you act. Each choice is like a brick in the foundation of a fortress. One day when the storm comes, you will find that the walls hold, not because the storm is weak, but because you are strong. If you have listened this far, you understand that calmness is not a gift you wait for. It is a discipline you build. I challenge you today: the next time something irritates you, do not rush to answer it. Step back, observe, let the emotion rise and fall without acting on it. Then choose your response with intention. Write down how it felt to resist the impulse. Share your experience in the comments. Someone reading it might be in the middle of their own storm, and your words could be the anchor they need to hold on. And if this message resonates with you, share it with a friend who is learning to master their mind. Remember, storms will always come, but a trained mind can stand unshaken. Most people treat failure like a wound to be hidden. They cover it quickly, pretend it never happened, and hope no one will notice. But the Stoics saw failure differently. To them, failure was not an enemy. It was a teacher with a voice too valuable to ignore. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, what blocks you is not the end of the road, it is the raw material for the next step. If you train your mind to see failure as fuel, you will discover that no situation can truly defeat you. The first mental shift is this: failure is feedback. When a plan collapses, it is not a sign that you are worthless. It is information about what does not work yet. Epictetus reminded his students that we control only our thoughts, actions, and choices, not the results. If you are judged by results alone, you will spend your life chasing approval from forces outside your control. But if you measure your progress by what you learn and how you improve, even a loss becomes part of your victory. Think of Thomas Edison's famous line when asked about his thousands of unsuccessful attempts to invent the light bulb: "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that will not work." This is not just clever wordplay. It is a disciplined mindset. Edison understood that each so-called failure was narrowing the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be. If you can adopt this lens, failure stops being a dead end and becomes a signpost. The Stoics often practiced what we could call failure rehearsal. Seneca advised imagining the worst-case scenario, not to live in fear of it, but to prepare the mind for it. If you imagine losing a job, you can think in advance about what skills you could offer elsewhere. If you imagine a plan falling apart, you can rehearse how you might pivot. This kind of preparation does not attract failure. It simply removes its power to shock you when it arrives. One of the most powerful modern examples comes from the life of Steve Jobs. In 1985, Jobs was fired from Apple, the very company he co-founded. To many, this would have been a career-ending humiliation. But Jobs later said that getting fired was the best thing that ever happened to him. It freed him to enter one of the most creative periods of his life. He founded Next and bought Pixar, which would revolutionize animated films. Years later, he returned to Apple and transformed it into one of the most valuable companies in history. The setback became the foundation for his future success. To turn failure into a long-term advantage, you must train your mind in 3 key habits. First, detach your identity from the event. You are not your failure. You experienced failure, but it is not the definition of who you are. Second, extract the lesson as quickly as possible. Do not wallow in shame. Ask what exactly went wrong. What could I do differently? Third, take deliberate action based on what you learned. The lesson is useless if it remains in your mind. You must test it in the real world. The Stoics also understood the value of perspective in processing failure. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself of the vastness of time and space. In 100 years, who will remember this moment? In 1,000 years, will anyone know your name? This was not meant to diminish human life, but to shrink the weight of individual failures. When you see your setback against the backdrop of eternity, it feels less like a crushing blow and more like a passing cloud. A practical exercise you can start today is the failure journal. Each time you face a setback, write down what happened, what you felt, what you learned, and how you will act differently next time. Over time, you will see patterns, recurring mistakes, strengths you did not know you had, strategies that work. This turns failure into a database of personal growth. But there is another layer: how you speak to yourself after failure matters. Harsh self-talk deepens the wound and makes you afraid to try again. The Stoics favored a tone of calm reason even in self-reflection. If a friend failed, you would not tell them they are useless. You would guide them toward understanding. Treat yourself with the same firm but compassionate voice. Sometimes the greatest advantage you gain from failure is not a new strategy but a new character. A person who has faced hardship and kept moving carries a depth that cannot be faked. The Stoics believed that virtue, courage, wisdom, justice, temperance was the highest good. Failure, when met with the right mindset, is one of the most effective ways to grow these virtues. A victory can make you proud. A loss can make you wise. Consider also that failure can force you to take paths you would never have chosen otherwise. A missed opportunity can push you into a better one. A closed door can make you build a new door. The Stoics saw this as nature guiding you in ways you might not understand in the moment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What happens to the individual is woven into the whole pattern of fate." You may not see the pattern yet, but that does not mean it is not there. If you have listened this far, chances are you are carrying a memory of a failure that still stings. I want you to take a moment now and ask yourself, did that moment end you, or did you survive it, adapt, and move forward? If you are here today, you already have proof that failure does not define you. The only question is whether you will use it to build your future or let it weigh you down. Share in the comments the most important lesson a failure has taught you. Someone else might be standing exactly where you stood, and your story could be the light they need. If you found this message meaningful, share it with a friend who is facing a setback. And remember, a trained mind does not fear failure, it uses it. Every fall can become the step that lifts you higher. There is a special kind of strength that is invisible to the eye but felt in every decision you make. It is the strength to remain calm when everyone else is losing control. The Stoics believe that this is one of the highest forms of mastery, not the power to control others, but the power to control yourself. Marcus Aurelius, as emperor of Rome, was surrounded by anger, deceit, and chaos on a daily basis. Yet in his private writings, he reminded himself not to be complicit in their madness, to keep his mind calm and clear like still water. This discipline of emotion is what allowed him to rule without being ruled by his impulses. In our world today, emotional discipline is rarer than ever. The pace is faster, the noise louder, and the provocations constant. A stranger cuts you off in traffic. A colleague speaks to you with disrespect. A family member explodes in frustration. The natural reaction is to mirror their energy, anger, sharp words for sharp words. But this is where the Stoic draws the line. Epictetus taught, if anyone can anger you, they become your master. If you lose your calm because of another person's behavior, you have handed them the keys to your peace. Maintaining calm does not mean you suppress every feeling. It means you decide how and when to act instead of being dragged into an emotional storm. Imagine your mind as a fortress. Outside forces can throw stones, shout insults, or even try to break the gate. But the choice to open the gate or keep it closed is always yours. When you let every provocation rush in unchecked, you are leaving the gate wide open. One way the Stoics trained for this was through intentional exposure to discomfort. Seneca would deliberately live with fewer comforts than he could afford, wearing simple clothes, eating plain food, not because he enjoyed hardship, but because it reminded him that his peace was not tied to luxury. You can practice the same principle with emotions. Start with small irritations. When someone interrupts you, resist the urge to snap back. When you are kept waiting, practice patience instead of fuming. These small moments are like daily drills, making you stronger for the bigger tests. Consider a modern example, Nelson Mandela. After 27 years in prison, he emerged without bitterness toward those who had imprisoned him. Instead, he worked to unite a deeply divided nation. That level of emotional control is not a gift. It is a discipline forged over years of reflection and self-mastery. Mandela understood that anger might feel powerful in the moment, but left unchecked, it burns bridges and clouds judgment. Another key to emotional discipline is learning to pause. Marcus Aurelius advised, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. The pause gives you space to choose a better estimate. Before reacting, ask yourself, will this matter in a week, a year, 10 years? Most of the time, the answer is no. The pause allows reason to catch up to emotion. Breathing can also be a powerful ally. Slow, deliberate breaths signal to your nervous system that you are safe. When emotions rise, your breathing often becomes shallow and fast, feeding the feeling of urgency. By reversing that breathing slowly and deeply, you send the opposite signal to your body and mind. This is not just philosophy. Modern science confirms that deep breathing can reduce stress and help regulate emotions. It is important to understand that emotional discipline is not about appearing cold or indifferent. The Stoics were not emotionless. They loved, deeply cared for others, and valued human connection, but they refused to let emotions dictate their actions. They saw emotions as guests, in the mind, welcome to visit but not allowed to take control of the house. When you practice this, you stop being a puppet pulled by strings of anger, fear, or jealousy. You can also strengthen your emotional discipline by redefining what a win looks like in a heated moment. Most people think winning means proving the other person wrong or getting the last word. The Stoic sees victory as maintaining self-respect and clarity. If you walk away from a tense situation still in control of your mind, you have already won, even if no one else notices. In the end, emotional discipline is less about avoiding conflict and more about navigating it wisely. There will always be people who try to provoke you, situations designed to frustrate you, and events you cannot control. But your response, measured calm and intentional, becomes your shield. It keeps you from making decisions you regret and allows you to act from strength rather than weakness. If you have listened this far, you probably know that you have lost your calm in moments you wish you had not. That is not a failure, it is a reminder that you are still training. Take a moment now and think about the last time someone pushed your buttons. How could you have responded differently? Imagine yourself in that moment again, but this time you pause, breathe, and speak with intention. That is the version of you worth building. Write in the comments one situation this week where you will commit to practicing emotional discipline. Hold yourself to it. If this message has helped you see the value in calm strength, share it with someone who needs it. And remember, no one can make you lose control unless you hand them the reins. Keep them firmly in your hands. There is a difference between reacting to life and directing your life. Most people spend their days in reaction mode, responding to emails, putting out fires, dealing with unexpected problems as they come. The Stoics, however, approached life like a skilled general approaching a battlefield. They knew that while you cannot control the terrain, the weather, or the enemy's moves, you can control your preparation, your positioning, and your choices. Strategic thinking is not about predicting the future with certainty. It is about preparing yourself so that no matter what happens, you have a way forward. Marcus Aurelius often wrote to himself about the inevitability of hardship. He did not waste time wishing for an easier path. Instead, he asked, "Given this reality, how can I still act with virtue and purpose?" That is strategic thinking at its core. It is the refusal to be caught off guard by the simple fact that life is unpredictable. Instead of hoping for a calm sea, you learn to become a better sailor. A strategic mind sees further than the moment. It asks questions that pierce through impulse. What are the possible outcomes here? What is within my control? What can I prepare now that will give me an advantage later? This way of thinking shifts your energy from panic to preparation. Epictetus taught that we should first say to yourself what you would be and then do what you have to do. This means your vision comes first, then your actions align with it. Without a vision, your actions are just scattered reactions to whatever life throws at you. One of the most powerful tools in strategic thinking is scenario planning. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. It is the practice of imagining what could go wrong before it happens. Not to live in fear, but to be ready. If you have a difficult conversation tomorrow, think of the possible reactions you might face: anger, denial, defensiveness. Then plan your response to each one. This mental rehearsal ensures that when reality hits, you are not scrambling, you are simply executing a plan you have already considered. Consider the way a chess master plays. They are not thinking only about the next move. They are thinking 3, 5, even 10 moves ahead. They know that every decision opens some possibilities and closes others. Life works the same way. If you react emotionally in the present moment without considering the ripple effects, you might win the battle but lose the war. Strategic thinking is about choosing moves that serve both your immediate needs and your long-term goals. In modern terms, think of someone like Warren Buffett. His investment philosophy is slow, deliberate, and deeply strategic. He does not make decisions based on panic or excitement in the market. He prepares for downturns long before they come, and when others are in chaos, he moves with calm precision. You may not be an investor, but you can apply the same principles to your career, your relationships, and your personal growth. To build a strategic mindset, start by slowing down your decision-making. When a challenge arises, resist the urge to solve it instantly. Instead, step back and ask, if I do nothing for 24 hours, will this change? What will this choice look like in 5 years? By creating distance, you give your rational mind time to assess the situation fully. The Stoics understood that haste is often the enemy of wisdom. Another element of strategic thinking is resource awareness. This means knowing what tools, people, and skills you have at your disposal at any given moment. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." In strategy, using what you already have well is often more important than constantly seeking something new. Inventory your strengths regularly, your knowledge, your network, your resilience, so you can deploy them when needed. Flexibility is also key. The Stoics were masters of adaptation. They knew that no plan survives first contact with reality. Strategic thinking is not about rigidly following a script. It is about adjusting your tactics without losing sight of your purpose. When life changes direction, you pivot, not panic. Marcus Aurelius compared this to a fire that consumes whatever is thrown into it and turns it into fuel. The obstacle is not the end, it is the raw material for a new path. One practical way to strengthen strategic thinking is to journal your decisions. Each evening, review the key choices you made that day. Ask yourself, what was my reasoning? Did I consider enough possibilities? Was I guided by principle or by impulse? Over time, this practice sharpens your foresight and helps you spot patterns in your thinking. Do not confuse strategy with manipulation. The Stoic strategist plays a long, honest game. They do not seek to deceive, but to act with wisdom and purpose. The goal is not to outwit others at their expense, but to outwit chaos itself. In this way, strategic thinking becomes a form of self-respect. You value your time, your energy, and your life enough to think ahead. If you adopt this way of thinking, you will notice something remarkable. Situations that once felt overwhelming will become puzzles to solve. Instead of saying, "I hope this works out," you will say, "Here is how I will make it work." You will move from being at the mercy of events to being the architect of your response. And in the end, that is the greatest win: to live intentionally, not accidentally. If you have listened this far, you are not just looking for quick tips. You are seeking mastery over your life. That tells me you already think differently from most. Take a moment now and write down one area of your life where you have been reacting instead of planning. What would happen if, starting today, you approached it like a chessboard, thinking several moves ahead, anticipating obstacles, and positioning yourself for the long game? Share your answer in the comments. Someone else may see it and realize they can do the same. And if this message has sparked something in you, pass it on. You never know whose future you might change by helping them think beyond the moment. Most people see failure as an ending. They experience a setback and they believe it is proof that they were never capable in the first place. But the Stoics saw failure differently. To them, failure was not the opposite of success. It was a crucial ingredient. It was the sharpening stone against which they honed their character. When Seneca wrote that difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body, he was speaking of a truth that modern psychology has confirmed. Resilience is built, not inherited, and failure is the training ground. The problem is not that we fail. The problem is that we often interpret failure as final. When you believe that a setback defines your worth, you stop trying. But when you see it as feedback, as information about what did not work, it becomes fuel for growth. Epictetus taught his students to separate the event from the meaning they attach to it. Losing a job is a fact. Deciding that it means you are worthless is a judgment, and judgments can be changed. Think of Thomas Edison, who famously said, "I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that will not work." Whether he actually said it or not, the principle stands. Each attempt taught him something new. Each so-called failure removed one wrong path, bringing him closer to the right one. This mindset turns failure from a wall into a compass. The Stoics practiced something called amor fati, the love of fate. This was more than acceptance. It was the active embrace of whatever happened, seeing it as exactly the material needed for their growth. If you love fate, then even failure becomes a gift. You stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What can I build from this?" As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." If you hold this image in your mind, failure stops being an enemy. It becomes the very fuel for your fire. But to transform failure into advantage, you must first take full responsibility for it. Not in the sense of self-blame, but in the sense of ownership. When you own your failure, you own the power to learn from it. If you see it only as bad luck or someone else's fault, you give away that power. A Stoic does not waste energy blaming external forces. They look inward, first asking, "What could I have done differently? What will I do next time?" One of the most powerful ways to reframe failure is to treat it like a teacher. Imagine failure as a mentor who is brutally honest, but always in your corner. It points out your weaknesses without sugarcoating them. It forces you to grow in ways you would never choose voluntarily. The lessons are often uncomfortable, but they are precise and unforgettable. A failed business teaches you more about cash flow decision-making and market reality than 100 books ever could. This approach also requires patience. In the moment, failure stings. It can cloud your vision and tempt you into making emotional decisions. The Stoics would advise you to pause. Give the emotion time to settle before you decide what the failure means. Write about it. Reflect on it. Let the initial frustration burn away so that you can see the lesson clearly. In doing so, You prevent short-term pain from causing long-term damage. Consider the story of a Roman general who lost a critical battle. Many expected him to retire in disgrace. Instead, he returned to the Senate and calmly analyzed every mistake he made. He then retrained his army, adjusted his tactics, and eventually returned to win decisive victories. His career was not defined by the loss. It was defined by what he did after it. That is the essence of turning failure into advantage, refusing to let it be the last chapter. Modern life offers endless opportunities for this kind of thinking. A failed relationship can teach you about boundaries, communication, and self-respect. A missed promotion can reveal skills you need to develop or a better direction for your career. Even a public embarrassment can train you to care less about the opinions of others and more about your own integrity. The key is to actively search for the lesson instead of passively accepting the loss. One practical method is the failure debrief. After any setback, sit down and write 3 lists. What went wrong, what went right despite the outcome, and what you will do differently next time. This process shifts your focus from shame to strategy. Over time, you begin to see failure not as a threat, but as a familiar and manageable part of progress. You can also use failure to build empathy. When you have stumbled yourself, you are more understanding of others when they stumble. This makes you a better leader, a better friend, and a better human being. The Stoics valued this deeply because it kept the heart soft even while the mind remained strong. The final step is to practice gratitude for your failures. This may sound extreme, but think of the most important lessons you have learned in life. How many of them came from times when everything went smoothly? Chances are the moments that shaped you most were the ones when you were tested, stretched, and even broken. Gratitude for those moments does not mean you enjoyed them. It means you recognize their value. When you live this way, you begin to fear failure less. And when you fear it less, you take bolder actions. Ironically, this often leads to greater success because you are no longer playing to avoid losing, you are playing to win. You understand that even if you fall, you will rise with more wisdom than before. If you have listened this far, chances are you have your own story of failure that changed you. Take a moment to write it down, not just the pain, but the lessons and strengths it gave you. Share it in the comments if you feel ready. Someone else may read it and find the courage to keep going. And if this message has helped you see failure in a new light, consider sharing it with someone who is in the middle of their own storm. They may need the reminder that this is not the end. It is the beginning of a new chapter. There is a silent battle that happens in every difficult moment. It is the battle between your emotions and your reason. For most people, emotions win. They win not because emotions are stronger by nature, but because they have been trained since childhood to react instantly, to defend, to attack, to escape, without ever pausing to think. The Stoics believed that this is where true victory begins, in the ability to pause, to step back, and to choose your response, instead of being dragged away by your impulses. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." What he meant was that the trigger is not the problem. Your reaction to it is. Anger does not come from the insult itself, it comes from the story you tell yourself about it. Fear does not come from the unknown. It comes from imagining the worst possible outcome and believing it is certain. Once you understand this, you can begin to reclaim control over your emotional state. The first step is awareness. You cannot control what you do not notice. The Stoics practiced daily reflection precisely for this reason. They reviewed their day each night asking, "Where did I lose my temper? Where did I allow fear to guide me? Where did I give away my peace too easily?" This self-examination was not an exercise in self-criticism, it was a form of mental training. Over time, they began to catch their emotions rising in the moment, not just after the fact. Once you notice the emotion, the next step is to delay your reaction. Seneca advised, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay. This is not weakness, it is strategy. The space between stimulus and response is where your power lives. Even a pause of 5 deep breaths can be enough to stop an emotional reaction from controlling you. In that pause, you can ask yourself, what is truly at stake here? Will my reaction improve the situation or make it worse? Consider a leader in a crisis meeting. News comes in that a major project has failed, costing millions. The room fills with panic voices, rise, fingers point. Most people respond by adding to the chaos, raising their voice, defending themselves, assigning blame. But the leader who is trained to master his emotions sits in silence for a moment, letting the storm pass. Then calmly, he asks focused questions and outlines a plan. That calmness is not natural, it is cultivated. And in that moment, it gives him an advantage over everyone else in the room. Modern neuroscience backs up what the Stoics knew. Intuitively strong emotions hijack the brain's decision-making center. Anger and fear trigger the amygdala, flooding your body with stress hormones and narrowing your thinking. But when you slow down, you re-engage the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic, planning, and self-control. This is why the pause is so powerful. It literally shifts you from a reactive state to a responsive one. To strengthen this skill, the Stoics would deliberately expose themselves to discomfort. Cato, the Younger, for example, wore simple clothing and walked barefoot in public to train himself not to care about the opinions of others. By practicing staying calm in small challenges, he prepared himself for larger ones. You can do the same in daily life. Deliberately take the slower line at the store, hold your tongue when tempted to interrupt, or listen patiently when criticized. Each time you succeed, you are rewiring your mind to respond instead of react. One useful technique is to name the emotion without judgment. Instead of saying, "I am angry," say, "I notice anger rising in me." This small shift creates distance between you and the feeling. You are not the anger, you are the observer of it. From that position, you can decide what to do next. Epictetus taught his students to see thoughts and feelings as visitors. Some are welcome, some are not, but none are permanent. They come and they go. Your job is to decide which ones you let stay. Another key is to align your emotions with your values. The Stoics did not believe in suppressing all emotion. They believed in cultivating the right ones. Joy in virtue, compassion for others, determination in the face of obstacles. These were considered healthy emotions. The goal was not to become cold and unfeeling, but to channel emotion into productive action. For example, when faced with injustice, the Stoic does not rage blindly. He uses his sense of justice to guide measured, effective steps toward change. There will be times when you fail at this. You will speak in anger, you will make a choice in fear, you will lose your temper over something small. That is part of the training. The Stoics did not demand perfection, they demanded persistence. Every time you catch yourself and choose differently, you grow stronger. And over time, these small victories add up to a mind that is steady even in chaos. In the end, emotional mastery is not about controlling the world around you. It is about controlling the world within you. It is the difference between being a ship tossed by every wave and being the captain who steers through storms. And when you live this way, you become someone who can be trusted in any situation, not because you know exactly what will happen, but because you know exactly how you will meet it. If you have stayed with me this far, ask yourself, when was the last time you let emotion make a decision for you? How might that decision have been different if you had paused, breathed, and chosen with clarity? Share your thoughts below, and if this message has helped you, pass it on. Someone you know may be one pause away from making the best decision of their life. Most people think of discipline as a prison, a set of rules that limits freedom. But the Stoics saw it differently. To them, discipline was the very thing that created freedom. Without it, you are a prisoner of impulse, a slave to moods, and a victim of every passing temptation. With it, you become the master of yourself, able to choose your actions instead of being dragged by them. Epictetus, who knew what it meant to live under external control, once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." True freedom is not the absence of restraint, it is the presence of self-command. Discipline is not built in a single dramatic moment. It is forged in the quiet, ordinary decisions that most people overlook. It is waking up when you said you would, even when the bed feels warm. It is choosing water over the drink that will cloud your focus. It is closing your mouth when gossip wants to escape. These moments seem small, but each one is a brick in the fortress of your mind. And when life tests you, and it will, it is that fortress that keeps you standing. The Stoics trained for discipline like a soldier trains for war, with consistency, not just intensity. Cato the Younger dressed simply and walked without shoes in public, not because he enjoyed discomfort, but because he wanted to prove to himself that luxury was not a necessity. Seneca practiced periods of voluntary poverty, eating coarse bread, wearing rough clothing, so that if misfortune struck, he would not fear it. Marcus Aurelius, despite ruling the most powerful empire of his time, disciplined his mind every morning by reminding himself of the difficult people he would meet and deciding in advance how he would respond. These were not random acts, they were deliberate exercises in self-command. In our time, discipline is tested in different ways. We may not face the same physical hardships, but we are surrounded by constant temptation, endless scrolling, instant gratification, cheap pleasures that cost us our long-term goals. The enemy now is not the harshness of the world, but the softness of comfort. And so to train discipline today, we must create deliberate challenges for ourselves. It might mean setting a limit on social media and keeping it. It might mean finishing the work before touching entertainment. It might mean keeping promises to yourself, even when no one else would know if you broke them. One of the most powerful Stoic strategies for discipline is premeditatio malorum, preparing the mind for difficulties before they arrive. If you expect the road to be smooth, every bump will throw you off. But if you expect resistance, you can meet it without surprise. Marcus Aurelius would remind himself each morning, "Today I shall meet with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." By anticipating challenges, he turned them into expected training drills, not personal insults. Discipline also means holding yourself to your own standards, not the shifting standards of the crowd. The Stoics warned against letting the majority dictate your values. Seneca wrote, "The crowd is the worst guardian of character. If you base your discipline on what others approve of, it will crumble the moment their opinion changes. Real discipline is internal. It is doing what you have decided is right, whether or not anyone is watching, whether or not anyone applauds." But discipline is not about cruelty toward yourself. It is not an endless grind without joy. The Stoics aimed for moderation, not self-destruction. They believed that discipline should serve your highest purpose, not become a form of punishment. If you train too hard without rest, you weaken yourself. If you restrict too much, you may break rather than bend. Discipline is the art of balance, enough restraint to keep you sharp, enough kindness to keep you steady. Think of discipline as a weapon you carry into every battle. Without it, your shield is down and your sword is dull. With it, you can fight not only external challenges, but the inner ones: laziness, doubt, distraction. And here is the truth: in most cases, the battle is not lost to the world outside. It is lost inside, in the moment you give up on what you know you should do. Discipline keeps you in the fight when motivation fades, when excitement dies, when no one is cheering. There will be times when you fail to keep your own rules. You will skip the workout break, the diet, delay the task. The Stoics would say, do not use one failure as an excuse for more. Return to the path at once. The mark of the disciplined person is not that they never fall, it is that they rise immediately after falling. As Epictetus said, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Every failure is a reminder that you are still in training. In the modern world, discipline has another hidden advantage. It earns trust. People follow those who can be relied upon to do what they say. Discipline turns your words into a bond. When you show up on time, meet deadlines, and keep commitments, you are telling the world you can count on me. This trust opens doors that talent alone cannot. In a sense, discipline wins battles before they begin because people want to stand with the one they know will stand firm. And perhaps most importantly, discipline allows you to win the war against yourself. It silences the part of you that would settle for less, that would rather be comfortable than capable. Each time you act with discipline, you cast a vote for the person you wish to become. Over months and years, those votes add up to a new identity. Not someone who occasionally does hard things, but someone for whom hard things are simply normal. If you have listened this far, you already know that the greatest enemy is not the world outside, but the weakness within. And you also know that the weapon to defeat it is in your hands. So ask yourself, what is one small act of discipline you can commit to today? Do it not for applause, not for recognition, but to remind yourself that you are in control. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this message has been valuable to you, pass it on to someone who needs it. The battles they face may be different, but the weapon is the same. Most people see life as a sequence of victories and defeats. You win, you celebrate, you lose, you suffer. But the Stoics understood that this way of thinking traps you in an endless cycle of highs and lows. They saw life not as a game you either win or lose, but as a training ground where every experience, whether pleasant or painful, can be used to make you stronger. The real question for them was not, did I win, but did I grow? When you think this way, even what the world calls failure can be turned into a kind of victory. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is more than a clever phrase. It is a mental weapon. It means that whatever obstacle you face is not there to stop you, but to shape you. If you lose a business deal, it forces you to improve your strategy. If a relationship ends, it reveals the areas where you must grow. If you fall ill, it teaches you patience and perspective. The loss becomes the lesson. The defeat becomes the direction. This mindset requires a radical shift in how you measure success. Most people measure it by outcomes they cannot fully control. Money-earned positions, gained recognition, received. The Stoics measured it by what they could control, how they acted, how they thought, and how they responded to events. By that measure, a so-called failure can still be a complete success if you acted with courage, honesty, and perseverance. You may not have reached the goal you wanted, but you became the person you needed to be. Think of the warrior who goes into battle knowing he may not survive. His focus is not on living forever, but on fighting well. The Stoics approached life the same way. They knew that loss was inevitable. Loss of opportunities, loss of people, loss of health, and eventually loss of life itself. But they also knew that how you meet those losses defines you far more than the wins you collect. Anyone can smile when the wind is at their back. The true test is whether you can keep walking when it turns against you. One of the best examples of turning defeat into victory comes from Epictetus himself. He was born a slave, physically disabled, and lived much of his early life in hardship. By most standards, his situation was pure misfortune. But he did not let it define him. Instead, he used it as the ultimate training ground for his mind. He realized that while his body could be chained, his thoughts could not. That insight became the foundation of his teachings, which have inspired millions across centuries. His life is proof that your circumstances do not determine your ability to win. Your mindset does. We can apply this principle today in a practical way. The next time something does not go as planned, resist the immediate urge to label it as failure. Instead, ask two questions. What can I learn from this, and how can I use this? These questions shift your focus from regret to action. They transform you from a passive victim into an active strategist. The loss becomes raw material for your next move instead of dead weight dragging you down. This is not about pretending bad things are good. The Stoics were not naive optimists. They did not say everything happens for a reason in some comforting fatalistic way. They said everything can be used for a reason and you get to choose that reason. If you lose your job, it may be a chance to pursue work that aligns with your values. If you make a mistake, it may teach you a skill you would never have learned otherwise. You do not have to like the setback to benefit from it. Sometimes the victory you gain from a loss is internal. Maybe you do not get the promotion, but you develop resilience. Maybe you do not win the race, but you gain the humility to train harder. These are invisible victories, but they are the ones that last. External wins can be taken away. Internal strength cannot. Seneca said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." The rough edges of life are what sharpen you. Another powerful Stoic approach is to mentally rehearse adversity before it happens. This is not to make yourself anxious, but to prepare your mind to respond well when the storm arrives. If you have already imagined the possibility of loss, you will not be shattered by it. You will simply say, here is the moment I have trained for. The athlete does not complain when the weight is heavy. The weight is what makes him strong. In the same way, the Stoic sees difficulty as part of the training plan. To live this way requires rejecting the common fear of looking foolish. Many people give up too soon because they cannot stand the thought of others seeing them fail. But the Stoics measured themselves not by applause, but by alignment with their principles. They knew that the crowd changes its opinion like the wind, but character endures. If you act with integrity, the so-called embarrassment of failure loses its sting. You may fall in public, but you will rise in your own eyes. Winning in every situation also means not letting external wins corrupt you. Success can be as dangerous as failure if it makes you arrogant or complacent. The Stoics treated both triumph and disaster as temporary conditions, neither of which should disturb the balance of the mind. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the cheers of the crowd are as fleeting as their boos. This kept him grounded, immune to both overconfidence and despair. When you adopt this mindset, you stop fearing loss. And when you stop fearing loss, you act with more courage. You take bolder steps because you know that even if you fall, you will land with something gained. Fear shrinks your world. Courage expands it. And the person who can find victory in loss is free to pursue goals with relentless energy, because there is no scenario where they truly lose. So what does this look like in your life right now? Maybe it is a failed project that can teach you efficiency. Maybe it is a broken relationship that can teach you boundaries. Maybe it is a personal weakness exposed by a challenge, giving you the exact map of where to grow stronger. Every difficulty hides a gift, but you have to be willing to unwrap it, even if the wrapping is ugly. If you have listened this far, you are probably not content to live a life where your happiness depends entirely on things you cannot control. You want the kind of strength that remains when circumstances collapse. So here is the challenge: the next time something goes wrong, pause, breathe, then ask yourself, how can I win here even now? Write your answer down, act on it, and when you do, share it with someone else, because victories like this are contagious. If you found this message valuable, pass it on. Someone in your circle might be one setback away from giving up, and you could be the one to show them how to turn that moment into a breakthrough. There comes a point in every journey when you realize the real battle was never out there, it was always within you. The challenges you faced, the setbacks you endured, the victories you celebrated, all of them were tests of the mind. And the truth is, the mind that is disciplined, focused, and unshaken can never truly be defeated. This is the essence of training your mind to win in every situation. It is not about stacking up trophies. It is about forging a spirit that cannot be broken. The Stoics understood this better than anyone. They knew that life would throw storms at you, and that you could not always control the winds or the waves, but you could always control the ship, your thoughts, your choices, your values. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, but he saw himself as a servant of reason and virtue. Epictetus was born a slave, but he considered himself freer than most kings because no one could command his mind. Seneca had wealth and influence, yet he treated them as tools, not treasures. Their lives were proof that true victory is not given by the world, it is claimed from within. Over the course of this journey, we have spoken about self-control, resilience, preparation, humility, and the art of turning obstacles into opportunities. These are not abstract ideas to be admired from a distance. They are weapons to be carried into the battlefield of daily life. Every morning you wake up is a fresh campaign. Every interaction is a negotiation between your higher and lower self. And every decision is a chance to either strengthen your character or weaken it. To train your mind is to take full responsibility for it. This means refusing to let your thoughts drift aimlessly. It means examining your reactions, questioning your assumptions, and choosing your responses, instead of being driven by impulse. It means preparing for hardship before it arrives, so that when it does, you meet it as an old acquaintance rather than an unwelcome enemy. The mind, like the body, grows strong when it is challenged, so stop wishing for an easy life and start using the life you have to build unshakable strength. Remember this: the outcome of any situation does not determine whether you have won. The measure of victory is whether you lived that moment in alignment with your principles. Did you act with courage? Did you speak with honesty? Did you hold yourself to the standard you believe in, even when it cost you something? If the answer is yes, then you have already won, regardless of whether the world applauds you or turns its back. Life will keep testing you. People will misunderstand you. Plans will fail. The market will shift. Opportunities will vanish. But if you have trained your mind to see beyond the immediate loss, you will never be powerless. You will not crumble when the structure you built comes down, because you know you can build again better, stronger, wiser. You will not drown in disappointment because you understand that every ending contains the seed of a new beginning. There is freedom in this way of thinking. When you no longer fear failure, you are willing to take risks others will not. When you no longer crave constant validation, you can walk your own path with confidence. When you no longer measure your worth by things outside your control, you become untouchable. This is what it means to win in every situation, not to avoid pain, but to use it, not to escape struggle, but to grow from it. But understanding these ideas is not enough. Philosophy without action is just decoration. You must live these principles until they become second nature. Start small. Practice patience in traffic. Speak with kindness when you are frustrated. Choose discipline over comfort when no one is watching. Every small act of mastery compounds over time, and one day you will face a moment that would have broken the old you, and you will stand firm. There is one more truth the Stoics would want you to remember: your example matters. People are always watching, whether they say it or not. Your strength can inspire someone else to rise. Your composure under pressure can teach someone that it is possible. Your courage can give someone the permission they need to take their own first step. This is why your personal victories matter, even if they seem small, because they are never just yours. So as you step forward from this moment, carry these truths with you. You have the ability to train your mind so that no situation can truly defeat you. You can turn every setback into a stepping stone. You can walk into any challenge knowing that whether you come out on top or not, you will come out stronger. That is the kind of winning that cannot be taken away. If you have listened all the way through, chances are you are not content with drifting through life. You want to live deliberately, to face every situation with strength and clarity. So here is my invitation for the next 7 days. Practice seeing every problem as training. Write down one thing each day that challenged you, and then write the lesson you gained from it. At the end of the week, read those notes, and you will see how much you have already grown. Then keep going, keep building.
Keep training.
If you found value in this journey, share it. There is someone out there right now wrestling with a challenge they think they cannot survive. Your sharing might be the rope they need to climb out. And if you want to continue walking this path together, subscribe so you never miss the next step. Remember, the only true defeat is surrender, and the only true victory is mastery of the self. Train your mind, and you will win in every situation.
If this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Write one thing down that you'll start doing this week. 2025 doesn't magically change anything you do, and your future begins the moment you decide to move, even just a little.